You're not a journalist.
And we are live.
Which I think is wrong.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Legislative Review Committee. This is Wednesday, September 11th, 10 to 11:30 a.m. We're meeting at a different time today to adjust people's schedules as needed. The first thing on our agenda is to approve the minutes, and I want to again, just, every once in a while publicly thank our wonderful Sarah here, for Sarah George, for the excellent minutes here. They are incredible. If you want a history of everything the Legislative Review Committee has done, please review our minutes. Anyway, a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor? I got that. Okay, let's move this over then to interim county manager Nikki Jones for an introduction of our item of interest on solid waste residential collection zone or franchise approach.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today at a different time, and again, accommodating schedules. Appreciate that. So we have been talking about this particular topic for maybe 2 or 3 meetings. And I think at the very beginning, we acknowledged that, in the past that this was a controversial topic. And as we've gotten through it, I feel like we've gotten to a place where we've become more comfortable with what is actually happening now, why it's happening, and potentially where we can move forward. So to date, we've talked about the history of the franchising. We've talked about the survey that we actually had in 2019. I believe in 2019, that survey had close to 1,200 responses. We've also had a comparative analysis presented to the committee related to what other similar cities in Georgia and Greenville, South Carolina are doing as it relates to residential collection and franchising. We've talked about curbside service. We've talked about limited backyard service. We've talked about roll cards. We've talked about self-hauling. We've talked about cost. We've talked about bulky waste. And ultimately, I think there was a recommendation from Commissioner Culpepper, I believe, related to surveying the general services district rather than the urban service district. So, we might need to figure that out a little bit more. But where we landed at the last meeting was whether or not we wanted to move forward and how we wanted to move forward. So today I propose that Director Jansen kind of walk us through where we've been. We hit some very specific milestones and kind of get a feeling for how y'all felt about each one of these topic areas, just to make sure we're all on the same page. And at the end of it, we can talk about how we might want to move forward and what that timeline looks like. So with that, Director Jansen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Manager. Sarah, you can go to the third. The first 2 slides, y'all, just again was the charge by the mayor and then the history, so that folks watching can understand where we've come from. You all asked staff to go back and figure out or find out landfill information and recycling information from the cities that we surveyed. So we did that. Staff did. Susan behind me. Great job, Susan, behind me for doing that, because some of these municipalities are hard to track down. It was till yesterday afternoon before we got all the information we needed after a few weeks of constant calling. But what we found out, same cities, we actually got a hold of all the same cities that we did the first time. Columbus, Augusta, Macon, Rome, city and county, Savannah, and Athens-Clarke County own their own landfills. Greenville and Macon do not own their own landfill. Columbus and Athens own their own recycling centers. Greenville and Savannah transfer recyclables both to Pratt, which is a private company in Conyers, Georgia. And Macon transports what they consider clean loads, which would be loads, when you're saying clean, it's probably just doesn't have trash in it, or it has mainly plastics. Plastics are what waste energy facilities want. So they take it to a place called Synergy, which is a waste energy facility in Cordele. And Augusta does not recycle. They stopped because they were getting charged about $90 a ton, which is actually the going rate for recycling right now. per processing fee. All the fees are attached in the chart. I didn't put them on here, but they run the gamut for the landfills. Savannah has the highest tip fee of $95 per ton, down to about 32. As far, and some are prorated depending on how much tonnage. Augusta, Richmond, they want more tonnage. If you bring them more tonnage, you have a cheaper tip fee, which is common, especially among private landfills, but also Augusta is not a private landfill, but they use a similar modeling. Other than that, the only kind of more unusual one is Macon Bibb sends their trash to two different landfills. One, the Houston County landfill run by Houston County, and Wolf Creek landfill. 2/3 of their trash goes to Houston County. About a third goes to Wolf Creek, which is a private landfill run by Waste Management. So, other than that, for the landfill information, it's pretty straightforward with the tonnage. Ours is listed in there too, tip fee tonnage. Recycling, some folks did not want to give us their processing fee. Some of that is kind of confidential. We could have done an open records request to get that, but we didn't go through that. But some they were fine to share. Greenville, South Carolina, just because we know what Savannah pays 150 per ton. Greenville probably pays roughly that same amount for single stream because they're using Pratt. Pratt's usually in that same ballpark. They're not gonna be a lot cheaper one place and a lot more expensive. So we can probably make some assumptions that Greenville's into the $100 to $150 per ton range there, even though they didn't give Susan that number. You can see the rest there on the sheet. The most expensive right now is Pratt. They're charging $150 per ton. We pay about $98 per ton to RDS of Virginia. So that's on there too, so you can see what we pay per ton. So, are there any questions? That was a follow-up question. So that's what we wanted to make sure we did for you
I
all.
really like that you added, and maybe I missed it last time, I like that you added our private haulers.
Yeah.
Was that,
Yeah.
is that new? That's new.
I think it was on there, but Susan highlighted it. It's really highlighted and more
I
prominent than it
really
was
see it
last
this
time.
time.
Yes.
No, I think that's all good. Thanks.
Yes.
John.
So Savannah is hauling to Pratt and Conyers. Is $150 a ton to haul it there, or $150 a ton to break
It
it?
might be both. They didn't specify. We can call back Savannah and ask. I would
That's a
imagine
long way
because
from
the going.
Conyers, I'm sure. There's a time.
Oh, they're gonna be at transportation costs in there. Most of the time, transportation costs are embedded though in the processing fee. Most of the time, if it's a contractual arrangement, which it is. Savannah actually does probably they used to have a little, what we call transfer station in the recycling realm. They used to be what we consider a state hub for recycling, meaning they got recyclables from other counties surrounding their county. At one time, about 20 years ago, the state was doing much better with creating hubs around the state where even rural areas had access to good recycling. That's kind of gone by the wayside, but they still have a transfer station. So they're probably doing some sorting or baling there. It's prep work, but I have a feeling 150 probably is transportation embedded in it.
Any other questions?
We can find out though, Commissioner Colbert.
That's fine. I was just curious. I mean, it's a lot more, so I figured that's what it was, but I didn't know we knew for sure.
Okay. Who's next? Any other here? You're gonna continue?
I was gonna continue. Sorry.
Okay, good.
And then you asked us, it's not the most robust one, y'all, but the turnaround time with consultants can be, our consultant is a smaller consulting firm. It's not like some of the bigger ones. And they're already doing quite a bit for us. We have a MRF SPLOST project they're working on, expanding the landfill into 2A and 2B. I'm not making excuses. They had a lot more on their plate before this one jumped in. But they did a basic cost analysis. They have all of our fees. They have our entire budget for Athens-Clarke County Solid Waste Department. And they did just a basic estimate. They estimated a potential customer base for Athens-Clarke County of 38,000 customers. That's requiring everybody to have service. That is a residential service, yes. They estimated the franchise would probably cost, and this is an estimate, y'all, because once you get down to it and you really have to put something on paper with an RFP, sometimes things could be different. But they took all those costs into consideration. They felt like for this region, it would be $25 to $30 for trash and recycling services. That's a 96-gallon container. Get rid of all the other ones. That's what SWAC asked for. SWAC said, get rid of the pay-as-you-throw system that we currently have, and that's what we sent forward to you all. Then if we wanted to add containerized service, it would be either $30 to $38 a ton on the high end. So that would be container, 96 gallon for leaf and limb, 96 gallon for recycling, and 96 gallon for trash, picked up once a week for that range, approximately $30 to $38 per month, is what they're estimating. And still that is cheaper, you all, than almost all of us, with one additional service that we don't offer right now. So we're not as low as Rome, because Rome has very low tip fees. You know, we're not as low as some of them on the list from the comparative analysis, because their tip fees or processing fees are lower. But this is what they felt like with all of our tip fees, processing fees, that they had access to.
And Suki, this is the grand finale of what you wanted to do since our last meeting. You wanted to process the research, get more details from the research so that you had the apples and the oranges
Correct.
Right.
to assess.
Well, because,
And this is,
Yes.
basically with, so this letter, this memorandum that's talking about a single private service provider.
that's the best case scenario to get to that price point that you want. If we want to break it up differently, you still might, we would more than likely get to that price point, but what you do is whoever gets to that price point, often the other haulers that we're gonna break it up, and they have to meet that same price point of the lowest bid or the lowest proposal.
Right, but my point is, this memorandum kind of reads differently than what we're talking. We're talking about multiple
Zones.
zones.
Yeah, yeah.
Not one. So
correct.
this
Yes,
kind of
correct.
almost sounds like a different idea.
Well, no, most franchises want one hauler or three, but they're all paying the same. Like if we send out a proposal and we still want 3 zones, all 3 zones will be paying the same.
Right.
You're not gonna have 3 different
I'm
prices.
just saying that it can be a little, especially
Oh,
when
I
we
can
roll
go
this
back.
out to everybody
Gotcha.
else, it would be
I see what you're saying. Maybe have the language.
Make sure the
Right.
language is-
Yep, I can do that.
one per, to me, I
Sorry,
thought
sorry.
our goal was a single provider per zone.
Yes, sorry about that,
And
yes.
so instead of us, because
Right, right.
that opens up, we've kind of
Yeah.
narrowed it down, I thought, as a committee.
Yes, we did,
We're
sorry,
talking about
yes, I will
zones.
change.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure that that
Good catch.
Yes,
continues, especially,
Sorry.
because in my mind, we're taking, you still have more slides, I bet that, don't you?
Yeah, but it didn't address, you know, they just did a similar letter for Houston County. They're looking at franchising down there. I imagine they used this beginning and and I didn't catch it because they were working so fast.
Yeah.
So-
No, and I get it, and that's why I gave you more time.
Yeah.
Because you had a lot on your,
Yeah, no, I appreciate
and the
that.
boots and everything. The crutches, but, so, to me, I think that we're at a point to roll this to the whole commission to learn and get feedback from. I know we had talked
Right.
about a survey, but I think that we need to loop the rest of the commission in.
And we have some more slides.
Do it-
too,
Let's
to
get to the
address.
rest of
Yeah,
the slides and then get there.
Are there any questions about the actual cost analysis before I move forward?
I have 2.
Okay, Jesse.
One, the leaf and limb cost, is that assuming that that's an optional service, or would that just basically be saying everyone has to have it the same way?
It would be optional. So that would be probably an optional service that everybody has access to if they want it. There probably be some places that don't really need the service. Honestly, when you have that type of service, usually you start with trash, what I have read, usually trash and recycling are started with. And then once you get all the kinks worked out with that franchise, then you can see who wants to opt in.
Okay, so people
For
could
that
opt in and
service.
we'd still be getting that price without having to do it.
Potentially, yes, yes. Yeah, it need, now, if you only had 5 people opt in, Commissioner, there would be issues, there'd be issues. But just knowing how popular our current Leaf and Limb program is, I think there would be a lot of excited people getting the opportunity to have that.
And,
Once a
and
week.
and are you also wanting to move to the weekly for the urban service district while we're talking about all this?
Correct, it would have to be, to me, I mean, we would have to mirror everything that the general service district, that, for consistency. One thing that we wanted to reach is consistency, marketing consistency, service consistency, so yes. And we didn't put bulky in here, you all, because you all already approved the bulky waste program. So we did not add that service in, since we are gonna do that similar to we do leaf and limb. And if you had leaf and limb this way, our current Leaf and Limb staff could do more bulky waste. There could be a lot of synergies here and a lot of potentially either reducing that down and using them more efficiently for large pickups of leaf and limb and large, maybe more bulky waste service than what we're proposing maybe 4 times a year. If we could use some of that leaf and limb staff, we could up bulky waste collections and do more with that. There could be a lot of changes to that service,
I think
that
that's,
service unit.
that's important as this rolls out,
Yeah.
the whole overhaul,
Yeah,
the whole,
Yeah.
efficiency of use kind of thing.
Jesse, you had a second question.
Yeah, it's just if you could refresh my memory on it, I remember the idea of moving to one size bin was because it's more cost effective for haulers essentially. But,
Well,
Do we have
and
a-
us as a hauler too, though,
Uh-huh.
include us in that bin. Yes.
yeah,
Yes, correct.
but do we have a sense of how that will affect people's tendency to just throw more stuff away?
The
whole idea is that it sort of rewards people for
Correct.
producing less waste, right?
Yes, yeah, that the incentive will not be there. I will say, I think our permanent residents of Athens, I don't think they need that incentive. In my opinion, our avid recyclers are avid, and then some of our more transient population don't do the greatest job with the containers. Commissioner Hool, and I know I'm sounding a little, it's a real struggle with students and our container sizes. They want 5 people in one house to have a 24-gallon container, and there's no realm where 5 people, college kids can, they just, the price. And so we end up having to bump them up and deal with a lot of issues. So we all have actually an internal policy that if they're college students and there's more than 2 in a house, we will not deliver them a 25-gallon. So I think I could do some research into that because there have been places that moved away from pay as you throw, and I could see what their recycling rate is and or went down to or went up or stayed the same if you would like us to, because pay as you throw isn't as popular as it once was in the United States. So I could look into that. But yes, but theoretically, we would lose that initial incentive to reduce waste, because pay as you throw is a waste reduction activity.
They have an interesting program in Portland, Maine, where you get your recycling, but you have to buy your trash bags, and they can only go out and you have to pay $5 a trash bag. So people are incredibly incentivized to do that. I thought it was just a new idea I wanted to share.
And it could also cause people to put the wrong thing in the recycling.
Yeah, right, but those bags aren't really big. So, but it was just a different idea I hadn't come across.
And I will say, Commissioner, but everybody that's, I don't think there's any realm where we wouldn't still, I know we would still have some of the smaller carts for our elderly customers and backyard customers. And I imagine we would just ask the private haulers, because we're gonna have a tremendous, if you change this, we're gonna have some roll carts. If we get rid of pay as you throw, we're gonna have some smaller roll carts left over. Why not just keep those, repurpose them for, backyard customers, folks that are not able to roll those out, big containers out. So I think there could be some repurposing of some of those containers and still use in the elderly and the list that we have of people that are not able to roll their carts out and curb.
Let's just not pick on the seasoned residents. Some of us don't have space
I'm trying to be
to
tactful
park-
here,
to
yes.
park the larger ones. So some of us
True.
prefer
No, that is.
the space economy of the small one, even though we are capable of rolling.
So what's the most common size right now?
For us, I can only speak on us. 64-gallon is our,
So 96
64 and 96 are our,
Yeah.
if you put them together, we have more users of 64 and 96. And we have one private hauler in here. We could ask, if you don't mind me asking Matt too, he probably know off the top, what is your most common size?
Our most common size is the 96 more than the 65. And the reason being is that when people for holidays, events, things like that, everything has to be in the car. Since COVID, we've really enforced that. All the haulers have enforced that. Everything's got to be in the car. We're not picking up off the ground. Keeps it cleaner too. People have reduced to the 65 only for the reason for cost savings, because tipping fees and everything have gone up, or they realize I really don't need this big can. but the majority is 96 across the board.
And ours just happened at 64. It could be our seasoned folks like Commissioner Wright, that do a great job. No, that's right.
But, so if we switch to all 64, I mean, like you said, is that a space issue? People, you know, put them in their garage, they put them on the side of the house, is it that much bigger? Is it gonna be a problem where they're gonna put them?
It is bigger, and we could definitely address that. But the footprint size is not that much different between 96 and 64, the actual footprint.
I would imagine you probably, because Clarke County, all your recycling carts for where you live, Commissioner, would be 96-gallon cans for recycling, correct?
We do have some 32 on the street, but maybe 96, you're right.
You have recycling at your house.
Yeah, that's a 96.
That's a 96-gallon cart, but it's hard to, when you say those numbers, it
Yeah.
sounds like a lot harder,
Mhm.
but it's really that the body of the cart just gets a little wider and it's just a little bit taller.
Okay.
So a 65 holds 4 or 5 bags, 96 will hold like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And so that's the comparison, our recycling is the 96.
Yes, for most everybody. And we have some 32s again for our folks that are backyard customers that can't wield that, elderly folks and altered ability folks. We have 32s for them.
Is it question here, John?
So
I'm sorry.
that other slide said it's based on 38,000 folks. If we add up these, the Athens-Clarke County, AAA, curbside, and all the public, Johnson, Son, and Waste Pros, that's only 23,000.
Yes, sir. Because we have a lot of self-haulers, but we're not sure exactly how many. This is gonna have to be something, let's just say GIS, the Water Business Office, Solid Waste, all have different numbers on how many residential customers there are. The closest we got is from the new public utilities system. Since they're converting to new software, we feel like 38,000 is the number that we would have. But I will tell you, for many years, the 3 departments that deal with this had fairly different numbers on single-family homes. Plus, we've had infill over the years in some areas, and that has upped that. And I'm not, in this statement, not all of our private haulers, and I'm not saying Matt, have always historically given us accurate numbers. I don't see their number. And we know, we have had to check a couple of them for not giving us accurate numbers, and there were some pretty major discrepancies in the past. But I feel like now all of them are a little bit, probably represent what their customer base is, because they understand we've been talking about franchising. And what we were talking about is giving you a zone based on your current customer base. So I think some of them are getting better about accurately reporting. We have seen discrepancies because it's self-reporting. I
Right.
don't have access to their books to know. We're just depending on their quarterly reports that they send to staff. Susan crunches those numbers for us, and then that's where we get those numbers. Our numbers come from public utilities. So we know that those are accurate, for us.
So,
Theirs come from their own reporting, and there have been some discrepancies in the past.
but curbside, that's not self-haul, that's a company then.
That is a private company's name.
Okay.
Yes.
So I get you. I thought that was me, the self-haul.
No. Those are all, those in the gray at the bottom, and then the next page are all permitted haulers in the residential sector.
I have a question here on this. One thing is just on that, back to those things, the other, I guess, a recycling, is that a 96-gallon container for that?
That's what, they ran the numbers on a 96-gallon, yes.
So right now, as a curbside, I'm getting a what is it? It's a little small, one of those little
You probably have a 32-gallon, more than likely, container, or if you're,
box.
18-gallon, you're talking like an 18-gallon, toter, like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
getting our old school, like,
And I have to pay another $9 for a second one. So I'm paying $18 right now for recycling. Oh, I gotta change that.
that's because those containers are a lot less expensive and easier for our private haulers to buy.
Right.
Like Matt, AAA and curbside are what we call mid-size haulers, mid to small haulers. And it's harder for them and more expensive to them because they're not piggying back off of regional contracts like Republic and Waste Pro. Waste Pro and Republic can get parts cheaper, and in quantities, that AAA and curbside can't. So curbside, it's more cost efficient to use those bins often for them.
On the other, second question is about the cost overall, with the self-haulers, and what we're talking about is John looking at that math of people, maybe 10,000 people who would be having a charge that didn't have it before. That's a charge of $300 a year, which for some people is not a problem, but for other people would be a problem. We talked last time about, what was it, that there are programs for people who are low income. Do we have any information on that? Because I'm just seeing the reaction there, like anticipating the reaction and the reality of this when we're talking about millage rate reductions. And we talk about a millage rate reduction that would end up in a $50 a year difference, it becomes a thing like that's gonna cost, that's gonna be a big impact on someone. And here we're talking $300. So,
300 additional based off of what they're paying now.
well, they're not paying anything. The people who are not.
The self-haulers?
Well,
They're paying
maybe they
10
are,
land.
some of them are, but some of them might be,
Well,
some,
there's a delta, right?
Yeah, they're paying,
Well,
they're paying
there's-
gas to get there.
but there's one person in my neighborhood who, for example, brings all her stuff they have all the stuff to recycling for free. And they bring one, like, they talk about how small the bag is that they bring once every couple of months. That's not gonna add up to $300. So, I mean, that's someone who probably could afford it, but there probably are people who do find other creative ways to not be paying $300.
So where do they take that back?
Well, I don't think it.
What I'm saying is it's naive of us to think that they're doing the right thing with the.
Oh, no, but I mean, I have no idea.
Anybody that
Well,
anybody
I have actually no idea. That might be good for me to know. It's if I am self-hauling and I had 2 bags of trash. Okay, a month, because I could do that. I could change that to 2 bags of trash a month. Those plastic ones that go in the kitchen. And I had that, if I was some super thing, how much would that cost for me to self-haul? I mean, I need to know that cost as well, so I can compare this and know what the real impact is on people who are doing that, because I could just bring all my recycling down. So I just want to really understand the impact on people's budgets here, so we can anticipate that.
And Commissioner Myers, if I might here, I think as we've kind of discussed this, and y'all please jump in, I think we realize it's like a level of service issue it's really a level of service issue. I mean, you can have all the bells and whistles for X amount of dollars.
Mhm.
We can cut one thing, it's gonna be cheaper. We can cut another thing, it's gonna be cheaper. So we can frame it any way we want to get to a price that I think is gonna be okay for most. But when you're talking about self-haulers, I guess I should just say that, we're the only.
Well, I understand that.
The ones we survey.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that. I'm just talking about the political reality of us moving forward in the reaction. I want to have answers. I want to understand or have the answers as we're going forward, just so that I can have all the data there.
Understood.
Do we know the percentage of people in Athens-Clarke County that use self-hauling?
We can make assumptions, and I can pull, here's what was during COVID, and we still have this data, is the only data I'm gonna be able to pull from to know who's truly self-hauling, is we had appointments for every single person that came out there. And we actually do have, some data
Interesting,
as to
yeah.
how many self-haulers were coming. But that would be the only way, that's, once we got rid of appointments, I don't have any clear way to know if it's Oglethorpe County resident coming in, if it's a Clarke County resident coming in with that 1 bag of trash, or even if that $3 charge or $10 charge, I don't even know if that was a self-hauler or if it was me who has somebody that was just taking extra trash to the landfill. So I have no way to distinguish that in data and WasteWorks.
Yeah.
I could go back to COVID. I kept that for a reason, because we were finding some really interesting data out that we never had before, because every single person out there had to have an appointment.
Yeah.
And we knew where they were coming from, and we knew if they were self-hauler, because we didn't have to it was all almost self-haulers. Because the commercial entities had accounts. They didn't have to touch anything anyway. We were trying to get rid of money, cash exchanges, et cetera.
Yeah, and so asking for data that is not attainable is a question that you've asked. But
Actually, I asked how much it costs to bring the 2 bags of trash to,
Yeah.
that's all I asked to
We
begin
can
with.
get,
Yeah.
well,
that's
yeah,
all.
that's, we have a tipping fee that you
Yeah,
have
well,
to do the
that's-
math on. But the public health issue of somebody piling their trash to get to a point that they finally take it to tip, you know, if they do it every 6 months, that's a, you know, the people that Suki was talking about that use more than the roll card in my district, they're bags that are put out in the street one night and the next day, the raccoons, the dogs, somebody's got.
No, no,
I mean, so these are public health issues as well, as far as us not knowing, us dealing with people who aren't doing the right thing with their.
Right, and maybe, and that information needs to be available as well. I mean, I have people who are contacting me already about this. I want to have answers to explain back. And I'm sure that the people who are contacting me are the ones who are more likely to line up in City Hall. So then me, who is like, oh, I'm okay, I'll do whatever goes along. I'm not gonna show up at City Hall on this issue, but there's gonna be a lot of other people who are. And the person who is the, like, I recycle everything in the world and I have a little thing and I'm okay with this for everyone else, but I don't wanna do it. I just wanna have some responses.
Yeah, and just to let you know, it's $3 a bag at the landfill, and then
Okay.
they can bring, in a load, they can bring up to 6 bags. And so, but I don't know the percentage of people that bring 6 bags out. We
Right.
do have a punch card for folks too. It gives them a slight discount. They can get 6 bags for 18, can be purchased at the landfill scale. It's a punch card that makes it easy for our staff not to. The self haulers, take an inabsorbent amount of time to deal with at the scales. So we try to get them out of that line at the scales as much as possible.
Mhm.
It drags our efficiency when you're coming out with 1 bag of trash. So we try to get them out of that line so we don't have lines out to Lexington Road.
If I could chime in, one of the questions that you asked, Commissioner, was whether there are low-cost options, whether we could do that. We have had a chance to research that, and what I will say is that the fundamental question related to solid waste, and we're talking about ordinances to impose restrictions, is there a rational basis for what we're doing? Can we defend, like, why the government is making this decision? So I think in many ways it becomes a policy question. I think some interesting questions would be, are there any examples elsewhere in the government where we provide reduced or low fee services for people based on their income? Is the government prepared to verify income status? And what does that look like in terms of us holding on to records that would involve people's financial status? So these are fundamentally questions that I can't answer. But what I would say is I think it is theoretically possible if we could identify a rational basis related, for instance, to public health safety as to why we're doing it. I don't know. Well, that's what I would say today. If you have any questions, let me know.
I guess to that, I'd say, I mean, we already put on the books a low-income homestead exemption that was passed by voters. So that's one example where we've.
I was suggesting utilities.
Sure, but I mean, if this is the first utility, say that we do that for, you know, maybe that's us opening a door we need to open to try to provide some more equity. But it's not the first time we've tried to do something for low-income residents, I guess, my thought there. But I guess I wanted to just share, like, for the small fraction of people who are really so good at managing their own waste that they really would be seeing a huge jump in cost because they're only rarely going out to the landfill and they drive a hybrid or an electric vehicle or something. And it's just not cost them anything to do. Probably really care about the environment. And a huge benefit of us doing this is reducing the massive amount of dumping and litter we have everywhere because tons of other people who quote unquote self-haul don't properly. So I do think that, like, part of the argument we're gonna have to make to some folks who feel personally like and they probably rightfully do, like, they're like really good stewards and they're part of a community where not everybody has those habits. And so they're paying for the community to be healthier and safer and better.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm not against this at all. I just want to clarify this. I am not against this at all. However, we have, I mean, as you know, I have people talking to me, as others do, about their property taxes going up. I mean, you know, Dexter, our fellow colleague talked about his going up 2,000. Mine went up about $1,000. So there, we're paying for services, you know, I'm paying now another, I am good. I am paying another, what is that, $1,200 a year already this year, okay? So there are people in the community who are doing that, and I'm just saying that there are places where, because I believe this is the case in Portland, Maine, where the hauling is part of you don't pay anything, just because it's incorporated into your property taxes into the general budget.
Oh, and almost all the cities on this list are doing the same thing. Like Savannah, you're paying for your sanitation through the general fund. Also with Columbus, you're paying through the general fund. Rome, I believe, is general fund. I think Susan has it on here, so you can see
Okay.
a lot of these are bundled in your property tax.
So there's an interesting phenomena there, and it's also, That's good to know. It's on there, yes.
Ask that question for you all.
yeah, so it's there, so that these numbers then are just broken down in terms of what's actually costing.
Correct.
For the individual, they're just.
Yeah, and that's why some of them had a lot harder time once you start sometimes, you know, in the general fund, getting the exact dollar
Right.
amount, some of them took a little longer for Susan, or
Mhm.
there's a range, I think there was
Yeah.
one for one. But yeah, there are, and to go beyond DeKalb County, City of Atlanta, it's also property tax-based sanitation services.
And I just want to clarify, can I just ask quickly? Because I do know there's case law on this where it is not, it's not what do I say? It's not actually your property taxes, it's just that it's on.
Sorry,
It's
yes.
on your fee, like, so you're
Thank you.
paying a separate fee, it's just you're paying it with
Through your
property
taxes.
tax bill.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify what we're
Thank
talking
you, thank
about,
you.
but it's not.
That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, sorry.
The millage rate, I mean, each municipality, you know, Portland's got a different millage rate, so we're not comparing apples to apples.
Right, right.
A separate, it's on your
It's right,
tax.
separate fee, it's just.
How it's collected. You're not paying monthly, right, like ours are doing right now, or quarterly for some of our private haulers typically do quarterly. We do monthly on the water bill, they do quarterly.
And like I said, we can do that in Georgia if you all want to, there's case law on that.
And then, I think, we were just gonna start, oh, sorry, somebody have another question on.
Well,
John,
just one more. So
And I can pull the numbers. What I'm hearing now, I just wanna make sure I can pull some numbers I might have on self-hauling, that $3 per bag. I will tell you, a lot of landfills too, I'm just throwing this out there, and I'm just telling, a lot of landfills don't want self-haulers at their landfill. So they have a minimum, and some of these minimums are $95 a ton. You can't bring material. Oak Grove landfill, they do not want mom and pops at their landfill, so they make it very expensive. The waste management landfill in Banks, we're about the only landfill in this region that allows mom and pops to come in. It's dangerous. They don't know how to back things on the working face. So a lot of them, you'll see minimums on a lot of the landfills in this region and around the state where they don't want this one bag of trash because it's very inefficient at the scales, and then it can be a safety issue once they're on the property. I'm just giving you information at that juncture.
okay. Just like Commissioner Hul, then Commissioner Culpepper.
Well, Sherry raising up this thing about the tax bill, I mean, just thinking about where, as we make this big transition, you know, we're probably looking for efficiencies too. It would seem to me more efficient to also at the same time then transition to charging people through their tax bill rather than having a whole separate billing apparatus that's like its own separate administrative overhead. Is that?
What was
Am I missing
suggested
something
for
there?
SWAC was public utilities, already bills for us at solid waste.
Okay.
And potentially, we have one of our employees sit on the panel for the new public utility software, because we're pretty heavy users along with stormwater of that software. And we told them that there is a potential to add customers for trash service. So that is one mechanism. That's not, you know, that's what we recommended. If you want to keep it the way it is in like enterprise fund for us and paying the private
We
haulers.
plan for solid waste fees to be looking at the utility fee.
Yeah,
As far as-
continuing.
That's right, that's right. Well, it'll be better because we have a new software to do it.
Commissioner Culpepper.
So look at like adding up if you compare 96 gallon, then you add the recycling with the private haulers that we've got, you know, the one thing that's different is, have we confirmed with RDS that that price, when the consultant was doing these numbers, did they
Yes.
talk to RDS and, because that's the big difference is that recycling cost.
It is, and RDS gives, in the contract arrangements that we have with them, and I'd be happy to send you, we get a letter, we just got our letter, and Susan printed it out for me from RDS, I think. But it gives the rates, now the rate could be more expensive, if a hauler brings in contaminated recycling, they're gonna get hit with another charge. That, it's gonna go beyond the $98 per ton. And what we didn't tell you from Savannah and some of those others, if you're not shipping clean recyclables, you're gonna get a contamination charge too. So it depends on the quality of the recyclables that you're giving to RDS or Pratt or to Synergy or wherever you're sending them. I didn't even go into that because it's another whole level. But the base rate for us and the base rate we would hope that would come in, because the recycling, if you franchised, our idea was the contract with RDS would be for all of us. Right now, we have a contract, Matt has an arrangement, we'll call it an arrangement, we have a contract, Matt has an arrangement, Curbside has an arrangement, Republic has an arrangement. And what I would foresee is shoring that up as well. Our arrangement with RDS would be for all of us, we'd have the same tip processing fees. The only difference would be if Matt brings in a lot of garbage, and the other private hauler that's selected didn't, Matt could have a contamination fee tacked on.
But did they talk to RDS, are those prices?
Yeah,
Realistic.
they didn't have to talk to RDS. I sent the contract arrangement to Atlantic Coast that we have with RDS.
Okay. That's what I want to make sure
Yes.
I mean, that's a lot cheaper, but then when RDS comes in with their recycling number, if it's a lot higher,
Correct,
we might be where we are right now.
right. And here's all of theirs, and I can share that with everybody at the end. That's our contract arrangement with, RDS at the moment. And that's what, Atlantic Coast Consulting received.
Do you have any more slides?
Yes, I do. The next slide is just
Oh,
recapping,
Suki, if I could lead into this, but I know Commissioner Wright, you got a question?
Yeah, I'll wait till the slides are done.
sorry, go ahead.
So let me kind of preface what we're about to look at. So over the course of all the meetings, we feel like we've gotten to this point. So, what we want to lay out is where we go from here, and what we're thinking about is this work session that y'all said you wanted to have, right? And we're trying to frame up how we would go into the work session and present all this. So what we are looking for here is your input on whether or not we've got it right. So for example, what we heard was 5 total zones, 1 urban service district, which we will continue to do, and then 4 zones in the general service district. If that's what y'all heard, if that's what y'all agree to, that's what we'll take and present at the work session. So that's what we're going to put as part of the recommendation out of LRC. So, just feedback on those types of things. Sorry, Suki.
And I know I'm gonna piggyback on what Nikki said too. Not only is it the suggestion LRC, these also match what the Solid Waste Advisory Commission wanted. So we have to be important because those are citizens that are residents that are part of that, and one of which is a hauler that has, economic interest in this process. So I want to make sure that we match that too. And then mandatory recycling collection, this is the political aspect of all of this, just like Commissioner Meyer said, is having those roughly 10,000 folks have service that they currently don't have a curbside service. And then incorporate, which we talked about, some sort of low income fee reduction. Columbus was the example that Susan found. And then here it sounds like Public Utilities has a similar. And then consideration of incorporation of other services. That's what I asked for here, the only thing I asked for in the Atlantic Coast was leaf and limb, but you do have food scraps that we could add to that component too. And we could look at food scraps being added into, San Diego has probably the biggest program and newer program with Republic Services where they have leaf and limb material and food scraps in the same container coming to their compost facility. We're letting them work out the kinks first, I'm sure, right? There's some ratio issues there, so we're all watching to see how that works. So there could be some growth there. We did not put that in bulky waste. We chose not to because you all have already approved a bulky waste program through the general fund. So that's one page. I feel like some people have questions before we even turn to the next slide.
Well, this was where I was headed for the summary, so let's see the rest of the summary
Mhm.
before.
No, I need to see what's on the next page too.
Okay, it's just process.
Oh,
We'll
process.
ask
Okay.
for like a recap of the recommendation process. and
Okay,
timeline.
so go back to
Sorry,
the,
back to-
go back to
right,
the-
go back.
Sorry.
So I would suggest adding to stay with the billing, stay with our current billing strategy and enterprise.
Okay.
Since that, we just sort of touched on that here, I think that that's gonna be an important demarcation to share with the group. And that does still stay with the advisory board's
Yeah, they,
thoughts, right?
well, they suggested that, but they were open because, it's more of an operational, they were,
Yeah, yeah, they
yes.
were- yeah.
But they did not suggest putting it into the
Yeah.
general fund.
And I think when it comes forward too, because I think we're still learning and not set, but I think it's also important to not lose where this came from. Like as these line up also with the advisory board, because their work has been longer than our work.
Right.
And we'll capture Commissioner Davenport with that, right? Because he's on it.
And we can send back that, we have like a 4-page document from SWAC
Yeah.
that came to you all. I can send it out to make sure we all feel comfortable with what's on that.
Well, yeah, making sure that
We looked over
that
it
the
though.
full
Yeah.
commission, well, Davenport already knows, so we're basically looping in for who are gonna be learning from the beginning with it, and I think those demarcations and all this information all the information is good to share, but the work session would obviously be your concise summary. And knowing that we are wanting to share it for more feedback, so that we're not trying to all agree now, but that we do want a consensus after everybody learns.
I'm assuming these things go without saying because they've been emphasized in your presentations here, but when you're consolidating it all, the three things that seem like big highlights to me are the very notable, extremely likely cost savings that existing customers are gonna have. I mean, that's like, I mean, we can talk about the few people who might be seeing an increase if they're extremely good self-haulers or something, but the super majority of people who live in our community are gonna save quite a bit. When we go to this. And then, the life of the landfill, I just feel like we can't talk about that enough. So if you can like emphasize that in here, like this helps with our life of landfill. And then also the, reduction in like dumping issues, like we've talked so much about dumping. We've invested all this extra money into like cameras and stuff to try to identify where it's happening. And then we're investing all these resources into trying to police that. And like, if we can just stop it from happening as much, that's a huge cost savings for the community as well as obviously benefit the environment.
I would add one other thing, Commissioner Pools. You're on point, because I've been thinking about what problem are we trying to solve?
Right.
And consistency among our residents on what they're being charged.
And what they're being told they can recycle, like all the consistency, yeah. Really good.
And services, we're getting more services for them potentially with the cost savings, so.
So increased
yeah,
level of service.
And then more curbside, easily accessible services.
Also, like probably explaining concisely that this is the one way we can really enforce things with private haulers, because that's been totally ineffective. I'm not sure people really understand like the legal logistics of why.
That's a customer
Alright.
service you write into the franchise, yes, exactly, yep, yes.
I guess we just basically
Yeah.
threw everything at you, but.
No,
Yeah, I think I have another thing to add to that list, but John,
So what is the current leaf and limb? I mean, talking about they're having to put that in a 96-gallon container.
Mhm. Well, currently, you put out
Right.
24 bags of leaf and limb debris in a paper bag, or what we saw a pickup truck load of leaf and limb. And we pick either or, not both, not 24 bags plus a pickup truck load. That's your put out, what you're allowed to put out. And we pick you up once every 6 weeks. We try to pick you up once every 6 weeks. With a containerized system, where they have them is you put mainly leaves in there, some twigs and stuff, that you put in there for folks and that's picked up. So we theoretically could use leaf and limb and bulky, roll them into one work unit and do bulky waste and leaf and limb bigger items that you may have. You're not gonna be able to put a 6-inch diameter
That's what I was
into
wondering.
a containerized system.
We asked them to cut up a big old.
No. We would still work out with our current staff, but we would be able to run it faster, and not everybody needs that service. Not everybody's putting out 6-inch you know, a lot of people in some areas are just putting out leaves in the fall. And then they don't use the service the rest of the year. I mean, we've got some neighborhoods, like my neighborhood, I bet we have maybe 8 users, because we still have a lot of green space. So like myself, I don't even use our own service. I compost and, you know, grass cycle and stuff. So anyway, we'll be able to give those folks service that want it. Like Commissioner Hool said, it's an opt-in service though. Not everybody, I mean, there are gonna be some people in these areas that don't have really a lot of leaf and limb. If you think about that neighborhood that my friends said about, they don't even have yards out there by the Publix. I can't think of that neighborhood, y'all. They all look like houses in Charleston, South Carolina.
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I have Brent Oak is, I
Yeah.
mean, they don't have yards, so they're not even gonna need a container out there.
Yeah.
So, but it's an opt-in service, but like I said to Commissioner Poole, now if we only have 3 people opt in, you're not gonna get it for $5 to $8. That's gonna alter it a little bit. But I do believe, especially in the urban service, we've got a lot of heavy users of leaf and limb in certain areas. And they love the service and they would, one of the common complaints is, why don't we have it more frequently? Or I came from an area that had containerized leaf and limb, why don't y'all have containerized leaf and limb?
Yeah.
Commissioner
Right.
Before Jesse started.
Go ahead.
So here's another point. Somebody who just bought my brown bags for leafing, you know, with the container, it doesn't have to be bagged.
No, we don't
See,
see bags.
so
No.
the
you
brown
wouldn't want-
bag, saving money on that. But, you know, another bag cost that you were talking about,
Right.
but the containerizing is keeping people from having to buy the
The
brown bag.
brown paper bags, yes. Yeah, we'd prefer no bags there and no bags in.
So that,
It makes it
yeah,
easier.
so we're helping you with the pros of it as it rolls out.
Commissioner Hool?
I don't think it needs to be in the presentation, but probably being ready, you know, secret bonus slide or something. I imagine you're gonna get asked about timeline of rollout, which I know.
Oh,
Yeah,
that-
but it's coming, it's coming. It's very tentative, y'all. but
Secret
it's-
bonus slides.
Yeah.
And then, the only other, no, man, my brain just blanked out. Like, you've said repeatedly to us, so I'm guessing it's gonna be in there, but maybe it also needs to be bold, like bold. Almost everybody saves a bunch of money, and then bold is, we're like the only community.
Yeah,
that's this way. And so we're actually moving towards like.
Like-sized communities,
Yeah,
but like-sized communities.
yeah.
There's a lot that do other.
Sure,
high-value
sure, but like we're like what seems very normal for us is actually very abnormal, you know? And it's not like the abnormal thing we're doing is somehow better, it's actually worse in all these ways. So I think emphasizing that is probably good too, because we're often hit with like, well, have other people done it? And it's like, yes, overwhelmingly, everybody else does it this way.
Yeah, I think this is actually good. I'm realizing in here among the people here, you may have it at one of these services as well. But, you know, I definitely have I've only lived in neighborhoods where we used private haulers here in Athens. And one of the things no one's brought up, which comes up all the time when we're talking about this in those neighborhoods, is the problem solved, the reduction of multiple trucks in the neighborhoods. That is like that is a constant like refrain that's on there. And I thought actually in my old days, when this has come up before, I thought that was the reason we were doing this. So, I mean, that's what was coming to me in my pre-commissioner days. So that problem to solve, if there's any, and also what was the phrase you brought up, Allison, about safety, public health? Yeah, where's that public health one? And get some detail, like what that means in there.
Well, the other one was, and when we were talking about some code enforcement things and, you know, a carport full of trash bags, because they're waiting to get the volume to take out.
To take to the
Instead
landfill.
of taking it each trip, so there's that, and that part of it.
And what's the phrase you used for college students? Instead, you didn't use that. You used transient. Yeah, transient. That's right. So I think that for me, that problem to solve is really important here in terms of explaining this. So that's not up there, but that's, yeah.
So, are we good with the 5
Yeah.
total zones?
Yeah,
Yep.
And, no,
Yes.
we went on to other good points.
Good,
after
good.
those good points. And I think too, that the not confusing, I thought it was important for more time and this meeting so that you could get it's time for leaf and limb to be more frequent in the container. Obviously, if you don't have room for the container, don't need the container, you don't have to have it.
Right.
Say, but,
And, you know,
and
we're
then
gaining
food
some
scraps might be complicating it, and then bulky waste being already addressed. But I think your economy of your efficiencies with labor and stuff
Yeah.
is efficient
Yeah.
stuff, but
Self-hauling here.
I think the no self-hauling is where I just think we're gonna get, you know, a lot of, I think just there's gonna be long lines. So, but that's okay. I mean, that's all right. I'm just saying that that's something I think we will need to be prepared for as we go to the next step.
right, and I think that it's, when I worked at UGA, I saw, because of parking lots, my office was close, people came in, got their trash bag and used it, put it in UGA's dumpster. So there's the dumping out the window, and then there's also the dumping in other. Yeah, again, there are creative ways. I think your example is probably if we had more people that were that good about how to do things. But I think they're gonna be very, because of that personality style, we
Right.
will hear.
But
The other person who's doing the wrong thing with their waste, we might not hear because they're not gonna come and brag about the creative ways that they deal with not having to
Right.
pay.
But that point that Commissioner Wright made is an important one on the problem to solve as well, because, I mean, you're talking about people bringing trash to UGA, but we also have a problem with that in multifamily developments that have things that are there's one of mine that's like filled with trash all the time because people from
Yep.
other places on Cedar Shoals are bringing it there.
Oh, I see.
Or
downtown.
Mr. Lane, you just talk to Lane Properties, then
Yeah,
Mr. Lane.
yeah.
But if you talk to, what's his name? Yes,
Yeah.
he'll tell you, Brighton Park, he called me, I got an earful that he is tired, he put up cameras himself
Right.
and noticed that most of these folks were folks in the general service district that don't have access, that were, in his dumpsters are constantly
Yeah.
overflowing. That is illegal
Yeah.
dump. It's stealing service. You're stealing
Yeah,
service
stealing
from
service.
Brighton Park
Because it-
residents.
yeah.
Yeah, and then it looks awful, but he will, the owner of, I mean, he owns several properties on the east side. He will give you an earful about, how he feels about this and the lack of, you can't often catch those people easily. So he might have a list of license plates to give to code enforcement, and this was his
Yeah.
complaint to me. He's like, a code enforcement wouldn't help me, and they can't help because they have to have pictures.
Yeah.
They have to know that that person did, not just a hearsay from, and I'm not, not hearsay from a third party. They have to actually, because we run the cameras, have to have multiple pictures, time, date, stamped, and really understand what was dumped there. And that's very hard for these apartment complexes to get. And so, but folks like that is a real problem in our community with apartment complexes that aren't gated.
And those are
So
Clarke County guys.
almost all of them, if you talk to him, almost all of them are Clarke County folks. At least the tag said they were.
I saw somebody drive up to the dumpsters downtown too.
Oh, yeah, now you get,
I mean,
yeah,
so-
yeah.
So that is capturing, the fairness of it. Anyway,
Next slide, are we even?
Low income fee reduction.
Yep.
So, is this something that we want to put into the work session, or is this? How do y'all want to handle this? Because, we might be able to do something like this administratively. To Sherry's point, it could be tough for us to administratively determine and track and maintain records for who's doing that. If we're asked to, we'll find a way to do it.
well, I would be curious to know how many people are taking advantage of the lower homestead exemption. So if that can let us know, I think I wasn't for that because it was laborious to prove or to educate the public on. It'd be curious to know how many people are signed up for that. And could we
Address and talk
piggyback?
about it.
Could we piggyback? If there's 24 that are utilizing that, then could they, that would automatically qualify them for reduced, if we
Right,
can
right, right.
piggyback the validation process.
Yeah, in my mind, it feels important to me to have in there, like, we're gonna try to figure out a way to do this administratively without like getting bogged down in the details of
Right,
how
right,
it works.
yes.
Cause there's probably, ideally, we find a few ways to efficiently do it. One is like, if you've already got the homestead exemption, the local homestead exemption, boom. But maybe another one is like, and if you're already on EBT or whatever, one thing that I just wanna, throw out there is that, two reasons why our low-income homestead exemption is not a great barometer for this is that a majority of the residents of Athens-Clarke County are renters, and certainly a majority of people who are low income are renters. So like a lot of people who might qualify for this wouldn't even be relevant for the homestead exemption thing. The other problem is that the low-income homestead exemption, as it's written in state law, pegs it to the federal poverty level of like 2 years ago, which is increasingly like less relevant. So until and unless the state government adjusts that failure of language, it's gonna be really hard for very many people to qualify at all.
Now you bring that up, the transient nature of renters may end up being a challenge for us administratively. Because one renter may be LMI, the next one may not.
But if it's attached to their water bill or whatever.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
that's the
We can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to share one other challenge. For those who don't know, I used to be a public defender, and one of the things we have to do is qualify people for services. And a huge challenge in the college town is you've got college students who don't work, don't have, any reportable income, but mom and dad pay all of their bills, and they try to come and say, I'm low income, I deserve these services. And so you do have to think about, what does that look like, and how do you effectively and fairly enforce that? Because you do, I think, genuinely have students who are solely supporting themselves, they're on the Pell Grant, like they're trying to pay their way through college. But I would posit from my experience in the public defender's office that is a small, very, like, I could probably count on my, one hand, how many times I've seen that versus the children who are just relying solely on their parents.
So, I mean, maybe this is something to say, like, we're gonna
Explode.
pursue this, but it might not be available immediately with the rollout of the program or something like that.
Sure.
Well, at the work session, I think you all could expect us to kind of talk through how this might occur administratively, what the pros and cons are. You could expect that.
Yeah.
I do have a couple questions, but I don't know if they're gonna be, there's more slideshows still.
Yes.
Are we good to move on?
Yeah.
So we got process.
Was education and on benefits and recommendations, we'd have ready for the work session on October 8th, to cover what we've gone over with you all, but more condensed to the broad commission. And that's the first time many of our residents, in Athens would see that if they, tune in. And then the agenda report cycles, October 15th agenda setting session, and with a November 6th regular voting meeting, if we felt like that. This is what was mentioned last time, so we wanted to review that with you. And then potentially revisiting at the November LRC, if sent back to the LRC from mayor and commission. And here's a very rough timeline.
Real quick, Suki.
Yeah.
So this is in an effort to have this all completed by the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's, and we have a month wiggle room. That's what we've left, a month wiggle room. So we can kick it back 1 month and then we can put it right back into the cycle and get it voted on if we had to. That's what this schedule timeline contemplates.
Good.
And this is a very rough timeline. Franchises take 2 to 3 years is what we're hearing from consultants to get everything done. So this is very rough. But February 2025, we could procure a consultant to assist with this process for us. We do not have funds currently allocated for that to occur. By the end of 2025, ordinances amended to reflect franchising. And then May, June of 2025, work with budget and strategic analysis staff to make sure we understand. We already have rough maps, but to go back and make sure we understand what zones we're talking about. And then July, August, hopefully release the RFP December, January, mayor and commission award franchises. This RFP takes a little longer to go through and to make sure everything, there's a lot of legal implications surrounding franchises. January, May 26th, you know, but educating, we'd probably start earlier, you all, but just a time frame, January to May 2026, very clearly educate all of our residents about franchising. And it's going to take a while for the private haulers and us to rearrange roll carts. You know, like Matt has said, we're going to have to, you know, either collect or know what zone you're in and do a lot of that. That's a lot of time and rearranging for the private haulers. Well, mainly for the private haulers. Consistent stickering or marking on the roll carts. So there's a lot of operational issues that will have to be settled once they know what their zones are, and they're going to have to plan out how they rearrange all their carts, or if they have a need for more carts, make sure we have to give them plenty of time to get new carts if they need to, if it's more customers than they had in the past, whatever that might be, they're going to have time to get everything in order as well. August to September 2026, maybe launching franchising. Now, again, I'm just going to tell you, 2 to 3 years is what consultants are telling us for franchising. It takes a while, so this might be a little ambitious, but we wanted to share with you what we thought we might be able to do.
Commissioner Holt.
I think it is important for us to have a page on our website that is updated as the timeline shifts and as new information is solidified, and that contains all this information that you're trying to get out. And I think it's important as soon as possible, if and when we do pass this, you know, by the end of this year, as soon as possible in the new year, sending out a notice to everyone with their water bill, like part of their little water bill newsletter mentions this. So there's kind of an early heads up with a link to that webpage, and it says like, track the progress of this over the next 3 years. This isn't happening right away. You've got plenty of time to make sense of it, but just so that the community feels looped in at the outset, and not, they're not getting hit with it when there's, you know, less than a year left or whatever. Because all these neighborhoods are like HOAs that go through their own things every year and stuff like that, right? So.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I think the timeline is important so that people are digesting all of this and knowing, like Commissioner Will said, that it's not happening overnight. There's a transition period. Just as a similar topic, when I was on the school board, it was how many school buses are coming down my street for elementary schools. It'd be at 4 and 5. Clark Gardens has a lot of school buses, you know, and so we were making neighborhood zones, but we had to talk about passion. A lot of people are passionate about their hauler, passionate about where their kid goes to school. It took 7 years for us to finally get neighborhood zones. We started with a little, close to the school, and then it took 7 years, and we updated, we're modifying it, and again, we had to keep picking away at it, because you couldn't just pull out, you know. You get to stay at that elementary school if your older siblings there, and then they have to age out for room. And it is heated.
Right.
It is a big deal, and it saved a lot of money because of transportation, and then air quality, all that kind of stuff, depending on which person it was that appreciated it. But it could be those people that you're talking about that are diligent self-haulers, will maybe appreciate the lack of traffic that's happening from multiple.
And actually, if there's any changes for the haulers themselves, if they're in smaller areas, what the savings is in terms of transportation costs. I have an important question about this timeline. It looks to me like if we go with the previous slide and are voting on something as a commission, you don't need to go back in there on November or December. That's a vote. But right there, it says by the end of 2025, an ordinance amended to reflect franchising. So at that point, could there be another vote? I mean, we obviously have to do that. What are we voting on now? And then if we voted on something and approved something, then this ordinance at the end of 2025, could that be turn the whole thing back? Could that be? So, I mean, we're voting on it again, right? So what are we voting on now versus at the end of 2025?
I mean, I think what I would say to that is we can't vote on the ordinance until we are I think, prepared to begin instituting it, or if we are, we're gonna have to build in like it doesn't go into effect for a lengthy period of time.
I think
And so we could potentially do that, but of course, I mean, any future commission could change the ordinance, particularly before it has gone.
Well, I mean, anyone can do that, but if it's on the schedule versus not on the schedule,
Sure.
you have to get it on the schedule to change something, right? And so on this one, but what would be, on this layout, what would we be voting on? A plan to develop an ordinance? Like developing this ordinance with it to come back in 2025 for a vote? So
I
this.
think that's the intent. And I think it was built in to give us plenty of time. I think it could happen earlier, but we'd want to work with a consultant to make sure that the ordinance was contemplated all potential issues.
So it's not a done deal till that ordinance is passed.
So it's a good question, Commissioner Myers. And as y'all know, you can pass a resolution which would signal intent. I feel like on something like this, now, this is certainly up to y'all. We would need a little more than a resolution,
Yeah.
right?
I hate to do that much work and then a year later,
Yes, sir.
it's better down,
No.
wait for the year's worth of work.
Just now hearing Sherry's thought, I kind of like that, you know, an ordinance saying, hey, we're going to do this. And, you know, a sunset provision, if you will. But I would leave that to the attorney's office and we can certainly talk with them more. I would just say, I think we need more than a resolution.
Yeah, I mean, if we commonly have like, this ordinance shall take effect at such and such a date, so can't we just have that be part of this, and then in the future, if it needs to be amended, then you're just amending the ordinance rather than deciding whether or not to do it at all?
It's certainly possible. It's the kind of ordinance, I think the main reason we're cautious of that is the kind of ordinance where there could certainly need to be substantial revisions, but I think the intent would be the same, you know?
So if we change that, we would be changed that by the end of 2025, ordinance amended. We're actually doing that in November, December with
Yeah, I
a
mean, I
date
think-
for.
There's not really any such thing as stronger than a resolution unless it includes an ordinance of some sort. So having an ordinance that then, I think that's the way we solidify it and then just recognize that later on we could amend it rather than.
So if we go back one slide, we have a work session to educate full commission at the same time on the benefits and the recommendations coming from the advisory board. We're asking for a vote to move forward with the details needed, and the details are needed with majority vote to spend the time that it takes to get to the next slide's details. We can't just jump to the detail of next slide. We can't just jump to end of 25 after the work session.
I'm just asking about it. I mean,
No,
I'm just
I'm
asking.
saying that details between those is why there's that much
Well,
time.
and in fact, that's what I was just gonna say, like, are you gonna actually have an ordinance ready for us to vote on in November?
No, that's.
No, I know, but,
End of 2025.
yeah, and I'm just,
You want to know what we're going to vote
I
on?
wanna know what we're gonna vote on, because we're also voting on something, if the ordinance, you know, we're talking about getting through this and moving forward on it. This is we're changing the makeup of the commission, the public gets more involved. We could spend a year on this, and then have it voted down, which is fine if that's what we want, okay. So, but I just wanna clarify what we are voting on now.
So, okay, if we go back to the slides that talked about what's next one, right?
Yeah.
This would be what the summary that we made
That's-
for this, for the work session is what we would be putting, my understanding is, from hearing from the rest of the commission.
Right, but the next slide says is an agenda item, so is the agenda item gonna say vote to approve the development of this framework into an ordinance to be voted on next year, like, when it comes up?
We
What is it-
will,
what
we
is
will
this vote
explain,
on?
we will explain that in the work session. So. if
The
we're-
ask, that's the ask,
So if we are hearing from y'all that this,
that one,
that is the framework. Now, that's a very broad framework, and we will provide more details as it relates to some of
Right.
what would be involved in all of it. And if y'all could vote to give us a direction to start moving forward, to start developing these things, which is gonna take 3 years to franchise it. That's what we would be doing between the vote and the 3 years
Yeah.
and the ultimate franchising.
Permission to spend time
And
figuring all the
and
details out.
And money that we don't have money right now. Oh, so we are gonna have to have a consultant to do this.
Yeah.
We don't have capacity.
We'll put it in the budget.
So that's what the ask, so in the work session, the
Yeah.
ask is based on a bunch of us, the majority of us are nodding our head yes to go forward.
But you're not saying the work session back there, it's gonna be an agenda setting session as well. It's not
That's
just the
right,
work,
after
right?
the work session,
Yeah,
and we get a
okay.
bunch of yeses,
Okay.
and head
I
nodding.
thought you meant after at the end of just language, understanding. So we're good,
This
go to the
time.
same place, it's fine.
And,
It's fine.
and the next timeline is so complicated, that's why they've given those ballpark dates. And that's why we're not trying to do the ordinance in 2024, because of how complicated.
So it could be voted in.
Framework of an ordinance that can just be amended later though, and isn't that what we just?
I think that's what didn't we just say that, or?
They said that, didn't mean we ready to do an ordinance.
Okay,
Because I'm reading this as how complicated it is and how much we need a consultant involved. That's what I'm hearing.
Well,
But we have a work session with everybody else to understand and plot.
but we have to be able to tell the consultant exactly what
What?
to do,
Mhm.
is your point.
and, yeah,
The framework for us to go do something like this on this very specific matter is, I think we're gonna require resolution.
Mhm.
More than intent, honestly, this is what we're doing,
Mhm.
but that's what I wanna hear from.
From the majority of it, so
Other
we can
Yeah.
talk this around again in a whole committee,
Right.
but until we get everybody
right.
understanding, look how long it's taken us to nail this down, and we're still, so I think we need the whole group to then have the marching orders to stay in the other timeline to get to this future timeline, is my understanding.
Well,
That one.
there's
To
also,
stay, to get it going, to match this,
right,
we've got to get to do the work session, which will help guide us into the agenda report.
which means it could come back here. I mean, we've spent time, like, let's look at the traffic management program, where, and the other things we've been working on, where we've been looking at different lines and details and wording. We're not there, to your point. We have a framework. So theoretically, it could then come back to the LRC.
Right there.
Right.
November, see the November revisit?
Well,
That's
That-
only if it's needed.
that's only for this vote. See, the vote's on November 6th. If it needs to be on December 6th, but that, so I guess let's work on that timeline more.
And fair, and also what we could do is have another touch point with LRC, we can create another.
That's what I'm saying. If the work session is so confusing, we have to come back here. Let's come back here before October
I'm saying before-
15th.
Yeah,
But-
exactly.
Roll it out.
No, I'm saying,
You can't
in I'm saying here, go, in terms of process, go to the next slide. Is it by the ordinance amended to reflect franchising end of 2025? Is it coming back to the LRC during 2025 to work on that, or is that gonna be done
Most likely.
independently?
It would be.
That's what I'm just clarifying, because I didn't understand it.
Most likely it would be.
I'd say maybe. I mean, I mean, because some of we have a tremendous amount in our ordinances that are gonna have to be just taken out. Because we have what called a franchising section that's not gonna be relevant anymore. So we're gonna have to scour too. We're removing a lot from current ordinances that have to do with what we call franchising, which really should have been called permitting all along. So we'll have to be scouring, making sure all that is removed and then thoughtfully put in and legally what needs to be put in for a true franchise.
What I suspect we'd have to do logistically is go through and amend all of those current ones to say shall no longer be in effect on January 1, 2026, or whatever. And then had a whole new section that will be in effect after January 1, 2026. And of course, the date could be changed, other dates could be changed, but it will be an undertaking.
Do you want to meet again before October,
You mean October,
For the work session?
before the work session?
to discuss this?
That's just a question, or we can meet after the work
I
session.
think we're actually scheduled to meet before the work session,
Yeah,
We are, it's normally
Yeah.
the first.
October 3rd.
So we'll come back.
October third,
Yeah.
is that needed?
But we're still keeping this on the schedule for that work session. It's just a little refresher for all of us.
and perhaps
The
even
Thursday
going
before
into
that
the
Tuesday.
next topic here, we can, because you're ready to present that,
Are we?
are we?
Are we? ready
Okay.
for said? Because I know the framework now. And we can bring the framework forward. And also we can bring options forward as it relates to what the ask is. Because that seems to be
Yes.
from consternation years, like, what are we really trying to ask for?
I mean, if you've got your slideshow for the work session ready for the LRC that Thursday, we can all give feedback on what minor tweaks are warranted before it's published on Friday. Right? Is that what you're looking for?
He wants more guidance to make the work
Yeah.
session what we expect.
Or get a
So
full
that the ask
decision,
is
talk about it.
apparent.
Yes, yeah.
That's right.
And, to clarify here for me, what I was asking, was this going to be something that would be voted on again in November? And could be, we could approve this in moving forward with this framework in November, December, but it could be defeated when it comes up at the end of 2025. I don't have an opinion on that. I just wanted to understand if that was what we were laying out. So that's what I wanted some clarification on.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments?
Is that the end of the slideshow?
Yes.
Where's the bonus slide?
This is
Two questions. One is this is kind of the timeline after it's all rolled out, is what does the rebidding look like? In that, like if, we're talking about food scraps not being part of it now, but I think we'd all love for it to be a part of it eventually. So is that like every 5 years, there's a rebid, and then in 5 years we could, or is it every year, or like what's the frequency?
We could add to that, or I could see with the consultant, like
Right.
when we procure a consultant, we could ask how other communities have. Could it be an à la carte item that we have on there that if they wanted to add food scraps? I would wait though contractually for the 5 year mark before we do food scraps, just because I think there could be some options after some of these communities are ahead of us on collecting, larger communities, before we tackle food scraps.
Sure, so I guess take food scraps out of it, but just like broadly speaking, like what's the term, like someone bids on and wins the zone, how long do they have it for before they have to rebid? Like,
Typically for a proposal, it's 5 years. I don't know if franchising, and every year we have a renewal, but that's not, it's just renewing the same contract that was initially, agreed to through that first RFP. But yes, typically it's 5 years. Now, there are some exceptions, and I don't know about franchising, but the exception for like our MRF contract is longer. But, Sherry would have to answer that. I don't know if franchising contract, I hadn't even thought about that. Are franchising contracts longer? Could they be longer, like a contract like this, more than the 5 years? Or Gwinnett seems like it was longer than 5 years now that I'm thinking about it. Their
Yeah, I have
franchise,
to
but it's
research it.
positive.
I would say like for the towing, for the police, which is saying their annual, I think they can automatically renew, but they are on an annual basis. That's typically what we do, but we could certainly research to make sure.
Okay, yeah, I think for the first rollout, shorter might be better, just so that we have some leverage around tweaking or enforcement if one of the people who bids doesn't do a great job.
But typical RFP, you have that. It's 5 years, annual renewals, but for a 5 year
That's right.
contract.
That's what the towing,
That sounds,
the 5 year with annual.
I guess, I don't know if that needs to be figured out right now, but I would recommend that and not like a longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing on the bidding was, I remember there being concern among people that we don't hurt the private haulers. And that's why there were going to be 4 zones. But my understanding from this is discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it could end up that one hauler won all of those. And so, since that's something that's come up as a concern from colleagues and the public, I think that we should be able to, we need to be able to
Yeah.
address that and make sure it's clear, from the start.
We'll propose a process in the next, well, in the work session presentation draft that we put in front of you at the next meeting.
Okay,
My last question.
yes, Commissioner Wool.
Has there been discussion yet about what the consequences are to customers for not paying? In that, like, if you don't pay your water bill, you get your water shut off. If you don't pay your trash bill, and then we just turn you into the self-hauler nobody wants, like, what's the consequence for not paying, I guess, is the.
Don't trash your yard.
You know what I mean?
I hate to make this statement on that, but, when you're billed on, we have about a 95% of our current customers pay. I think it might even be 98. Veronica's listening out there. She might correct me here in 2 seconds. We have a very high, collection rate, and it's partially because we're on the water bill, even though we don't have the power at solid waste to turn off your water. The perception is that we do, and I can't, anyway. And so I think just having it on the water bill, it does give the appearance all those utilities are bundled, and if you don't pay one, there's no way to, even though they're listed independently, like on your water bill, if you have water, you have a water bill. If you have sewer, it's SW, which is confusing because people think that's the solid waste bill, but it's not. Then you have RC if it's a roll cart or backyard, you have different labeling on there. But yeah, we probably do need to have a more substantial way to
I would ask
let
what the
people know,
collection
but-
rate is today, like if we have 100% collection rate, well, it's.
But we don't hear about people getting their water turned off, right? So I guess I'm just curious, is this the same thing because it's wrapped into the water bill, or if you haven't paid that bill, you get your water turned off, but the trash collection still continues, or that's, I guess, just my question, because.
So if the water gets turned off, how are we notified, other departments notified of that action,
Sure, yeah,
right?
yeah, or, yeah, I guess I'm just wondering what the consequences are for not paying this bill, given that it's wrapped into another department's bill for a different service.
The stormwater's in the same situation, right?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do, turn somebody's stormwater off?
But that's not a thing you could turn off, or you
Yeah,
could
there's no-
stop picking up someone's bin, right? And I'm just, but I'm guessing that's not what we want to do, because the whole point here is to keep the garbage from piling up on the side, so.
Yeah, the difference is we have private contractors who are expending services, whereas the other two relate to government services, so we have less control over that. I think we would need to talk to the consultants, have a better understanding. I mean, I think fundamentally collection is always an option, though it's not necessarily a great one. I think this is also the reason why a lot of people do this, a lot of communities do it through the property tax bill. It's just that it gets,
That's right.
paid annually.
Yeah,
And the only,
Veronica said we have a 98%,
Well, so that, I guess to that point then, does it, even though we're currently thinking it makes sense to do it through public utilities, does it make sense at some point to transition to the tax bill if that's actually the place that we know we would get?
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters.
It's not 8%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For solid waste currently in the urban,
Yeah.
this is solid waste in the urban services.
just trying to think down the line, that 2% that
Yeah,
doesn't
nope,
pay,
nope,
what happens to
yeah,
them?
yeah.
Do their bags just pile up on the roadside, or, that's, yeah.
Well, it's 11:30, so do we have anything else? Are we good? Manager's office?
I think we're good.
Okay.
We're gonna come back at the next meeting with an actual presentation, with all the things we discussed. Get your feedback then.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned.